Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. It's 3 o'clock Eastern time and noon Pacific time, and lots of times in between as we go from coast to coast. My name is Rebecca Penn. I'm the project manager for the National Safer Supply Community Practice. I work for London Intercommunity Health Centre. I use she, her pronouns, and I reside in Mi'kma'ki, which is now known as, or colonially known rather, as Nova Scotia. And I'm really happy to have a great group of people here to talk with you today. We have a team from the Kilala Lelum Community Health Center, or Kilala Lelum Health Center, with us talking about improving care and reducing overdose risk for Indigenous people living with opioid disorder through partnering with Indigenous Elders. So yeah, just as we get started, I'm just noticing my screen doesn't quite fit on there. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the role of colonialism in our day-to-day lives. We're coming together today from different places across Turtle Island as people who live on treaty lands and unceded territories. And we work in a sector whose goal is to address social harms. And we must recognize that the production of these harms comes from the history of colonialism and its enduring practices, institutions, and ways of thinking. We also know that Indigenous people and people of color are disproportionately affected by colonial policies and practices and institutions and ways of thinking. We know that they're disproportionately affected by criminalization, stigmatization, discrimination, and the prohibition framework that we use in Canada. So colonialism is with us today, and we must commit to working in ways that reshape these institutions and practices. We must commit to repairing harms, preventing future harms, and working toward a more inclusive and just future. I invite you to put in the chat where you are joining us from today. It would be wonderful if you could also share the name of the territory that you're on and acknowledge the land that you are on today. So the National Safer Supply Community Practice, many of you joining us today are members of the community of practice. For those of you who do not know us, very quickly, we are funded by Health Canada's Substance Use and Addictions Program. We are a collaboration between London Intercommunity Health Centre, the Canadian Association of People Who Use Drugs, and the Alliance for Healthier Communities. Our mandate is to support the scale up of prescribed safer supply programs through capacity building and knowledge exchange. And we do focus on prescribed safer supply programs at this point in time. That is a medical model. And that is because it is what is currently most feasible in the regulatory and legislative context that we're currently living in. But we do support the scale up of different models of safer supply, including non-medical models. I encourage you to check out our website. That's where you'll find all the amazing work that our membership and our team do together, including things like workshops and knowledge exchange events, like webinars like this one. We also have working groups, and if you go to our website, you'll see that we have an archive of all of our past and upcoming, all of our past webinars in video format. You'll also find an extensive resource library and some other tools that might help you learn more about safer supply and help with your advocacy work for expanding the care for people who use drugs. We are recording this event and we will be sharing it on our website. Our presenters today are sharing with us their slides, so we'll include that there on our website as well. Just very quickly, in terms of technical difficulties, unfortunately, the easiest thing to do is just to log out and rejoin. Unfortunately, we're not able to help much more beyond that. But we do have a chat bar or chat box that you can communicate to the wide membership and to us using that chat. For those of you who benefit from having closed captioning, we do have that available in English only. And unfortunately, we don't have French translation for this particular webinar at this time. You'll see that there's the chat box. We also have a question and answer box. I encourage you to place any questions that you have for our presenters or for our team in the question and answer box, and we'll make sure we get to those. Okay, we have a certificate of attendance. So this might be really useful for some of you. If you're interested in getting a certificate of attendance at about halfway through the webinar, Robin or Alex will put a link into the chat. Click on that link, it takes you to a form, fill out the form, and a few minutes later, ta-da, there's a certificate of attendance in your email inbox. And I just want to draw attention to our hot topic webinar for January. That's happening on a Tuesday this month. Typically they're Thursdays, but this month we're just changing it up a bit. So Tuesday, January 24th at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, we have the AVI Safer Knowledge Translation and Exchange project team coming to talk about prescribed fentanyl safe supply. So we have Laura Cartwright, Ahmed Gahari, Kelsey Roden, and Tim Gauthier coming to talk to us about prescribed fentanyl safer supply. So yes, you'll find the link for that on our website. Okay, and again, I've already pointed out, we have a bunch of resources on our website. I encourage you to check that out. And with that, let me finally turn it over to our amazing team today. I'm not sure who's going to get started, so I'll leave it to you to take it from here. Thanks so much.
Sorry. Hi, all. I'll take it from here. Thank you, Rebecca. And I'll just take a moment to thank the organizers for inviting us to do this presentation. It's really a privilege to be able to speak to our peers. A lot of familiar names I saw in the chat box, so that's wonderful. Thank you for that great introduction, Rebecca. And I think especially you set us up well for kind of understanding the logic of what we're going to present and what we're trying to do. This is about sort of health system transformation, really, and we're going to share results of a prospective cohort study. And I am going to now invite Elder Sandy just to do a further land acknowledgement, and then Elder Bruce to give us an opening prayer, if that's okay. Thanks, Elder Sandy. Thanks, Elder Bruce.
I'd like to acknowledge the unceded ancestral Coast Salish territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people that were coming from you virtually, our team. All the surrounding territories and everybody that comes from north and south and west and east, as we know it as Turtle Island.
Simgiget, Sigidam Hana, we lulayam golf, Nikikunsnet. Wilps Nias Lishian from the Lakibu tribe. My true name's Wilulayam Goth Nakikwans, which means grizzly bear with a big heart. You know, I'm so grateful for being here today in this sacred circle. You know, whenever we gather in a sacred circle, you know, we're all equal. You know, when we gather with a good open heart and good open mind to be able to make a difference for each others. And all the ones that we're here to learn about and all the ones that we're working with. I'm gonna sing a healing song. As I sing my song, you pray in your heart, your own way for the things you're looking for yourself and for your loved ones, or all the ones that you're working with. Great spirits, grandmothers, grandfathers, so grateful for today. So grateful for everything you have given us in our lives. So grateful for bringing us together today with a good open heart and good open mind in this sacred circle. I ask that you bless everyone here in this sacred circle. Bless everyone. Touch all our hearts, touch all our minds, and touch all our spirits to empower us to go through life in a good way, to empower us to see the beauty that is within us, our soul, our spirits, to empower us to see the beauty that's all around us, to empower us to heal ourselves, to empower us. Bring all the good things into our lives. Bring all the good things into our families' lives. Bring all the good things into our work. Bring all the good things, great spirits, grandfathers, grandmothers, into our homes. Guide us well through life. Guide us well in all the good things we're going to do for ourselves. Guide us well in all the good things we're going to do for each others. Guide us well in all the good things we're going to do for our families. Guide us well in all the good things we're going to do in our work. Guide us well, guide us well. Empower us, empower us. Bring all the good things into our lives. Bring all the good things. So grateful for our beautiful and loving Mother Earth. Mother Earth, please forgive us for anything we've done to harm you in any way, Mother Earth. Please forgive us and be kind and gentle to us. When you bring back balance in our areas, Mother Earth, be kind and gentle to us. We love you and honor you, Mother Earth, for the sustenance of life. We love you and honor you, Mother Earth, for all our lives. So grateful for the people of these lands and the ancestors of these lands. So grateful for all our ancestors, for without them we would not be here today. So grateful, great spirits, grandmothers, grandfathers, for everything you have given us in our lives. Thank you, great spirits, grandmothers, grandfathers, all our relations, Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elder Sandy. I neglected to introduce myself right at the start. My name is David Tu. I'm a non-Indigenous family physician. My heritage is Welsh on my mom's side and Chinese on my father's side. I've been working as a family doctor on Coast Salish territory, the land of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh for about 22 years now. And I'm so proud to be with the rest of the team that's been working on this project. And maybe I'll just ask each and every one when you take your turn to first speak, just to share us an introduction as we try to accommodate to this sort of Zoom format. So I'm going to try and keep time. That's one of my roles because we've packed a fair bit in here. We really have sort of four interrelated presentations, which we're going to try and run through for you. Sort of a sandwich of some qualitative analysis, some quantitative research, back to some qualitative outcomes, and then some implementation science. We'll try to bring it all together and ideally have time for 15, 20 minutes at least of questions at the end. So that's our aim. And as always, privileged to have two elders with us as part of this presentation. So again, just invite both of our elders to just interject whenever seems appropriate, and the rest of us will accommodate. So the agenda is as you see, and our learning objectives. My hope is that by the end of this 90 minutes, that the importance of transforming our system of care, specifically for caring for Indigenous people, is seen as a priority. And as part of that transformation, to understand the important role that Indigenous elders and other medicine keepers can play in the care for Indigenous people. I hope that you come away with an understanding of our model of care that we do at Kilala Lelum, and how the practices that we've been implementing over the last few years as part of our SUOP project are impacting the lives of Indigenous people living with opioid use disorder. And lastly, just to recognize the intersection with chronic pain among people living with opioid use disorder and the importance of effective chronic pain management. So I will launch in now, and it's my pleasure to introduce to you the Kilala Lelum Health Center. Kilala Lelum is a Helcom Lelum name that was gifted to us from the Musqueam elders that with whom we work. Our aim from inception was to one day become a medicine house, and we opened our doors in 2018. Although many of us have worked in the neighborhood for many years before that. We are located on the eastern side of Vancouver's downtown east side, and we function as a comprehensive comprehensive team-based primary care center, as well as a cultural care center. Within our center, we do provide access to full spectrum of opioid agonist therapy and safe supply treatment options. For this presentation, I invite people to think of the whole model of care as the intervention, and as a way that makes those safe supply and OAT options accessible and effective. So it's the context, I think, in addition to actually the medications themselves. We have over 110 staff who work with us, and we are getting close to 1,600 members now. More than 70% of whom identify as Indigenous. So what is not news is that the primary care system in Canada is facing a number of crises. Although it's not news, it shows up in the news almost every day. And the failings of our system are perhaps seen in most clear relief when you think about vulnerable populations that have become vulnerable. And so Indigenous people, the problems within the health system are more pronounced when considering Indigenous people, which is why we really embarked not on an adaptive model for the system, but a transformative process. When we got together, Elder Bruce and a few other of us, in terms of what we wanted to try and accomplish through the work of Kilala Lelum. So the transformation of just even our organizational framework, which started off looking very much like sort of a hierarchical sort of box and line type of graph, has really morphed into a circle where our vision of health equity, our mission to enact the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action in health is informed by our values that were largely gifted to us by the elders that we work with, as well as key strategy. And try to have all the staff that work at Kilala Lelum be able to locate themselves on this graph and how it kind of links and supports one another. So this is sort of how we've structured ourselves, and this has been the evolution. And again, this is part of that transformative process. We were awarded a SUOP expansion grant a little over 3 years ago. And the expansion was really to bring to scale this model of service, and within this service to be able to provide safer supply options to our people that we care for living with opioid use disorder. So this is the first sort of qualitative implementation science piece, where we, in the first after sort of 2 years of practice or a year into SUOP, we did some qualitative semi-structured interviews, and we did a sort of a thematic two-eyed seeing approach to the analysis. For those that aren't familiar with the term, two-eyed seeing implies people familiar with both knowledge systems, Indigenous and colonial, that can combine together those views to address the task at hand. Our primary objectives, we organize this as a SWOT analysis, as well as one that we could inform our model of care. So we had verbal consent, we did semi-structured interviews, we made field notes and transcribed via auto recording. And then those transcripts were divided between 2 teams, one made up of one Indigenous and one non-Indigenous team member who both had expert content knowledge. And then we came together to co-create a concept map, and we used Vivo to facilitate the thematic process. The results from the 14 interviews of our staff, 7 of whom were Indigenous, 7 non-Indigenous, and that roughly follows the breakdown of our staff at Kilala Lelum, where about 50% of our staff identify as an Indigenous person. And we tried to sample from a mix of different staff categories. We had 5 major themes that came out of this analysis. And the first is that this is part of a larger journey or movement to decolonize healthcare for Indigenous people. That's how we understand the work that we're doing. And we're seeing some early system transformation, but there's still a distance to travel. Some of the obstacles are just the struggles to find the appropriate resources and the bucking against the larger colonial systems in which we are sort of an island surrounded by an ocean of that colonial medicine system. There is a large process of unlearning and relearning in this journey, and the threat is kind of resisting collapse and burnout. I'll take a moment to just define decolonization, which has sort of been a learning process for all of us. I think there's many ways of understanding this very loaded word, but it can be seen both as a reactive undoing of colonialism, as well as a proactive sharing between peoples, receiving from each other what works, what does not. That latter part of the definition was gifted to us by Dr. Elsie Paul, an elder from the Siaman Nation. So drawing from the work of In Plain Sight, we see and understand the process of decolonizing healthcare as a transformative process. It's the practice of identifying, challenging, preventing, eliminating, and changing the values, structures, policies, programs, and practices and behaviors that perpetuate colonialism, and respectful sharing of cultural approaches to health and well-being. So in a sense, that is our day-to-day work, and it's sort of in all of what we're doing. I'll hand over to Jill just to kind of go through some of the themes and sub-themes and ask you to introduce yourself, Jill.
Okay, thanks, David, and hi, everyone. My name is Jill Fikowski. To introduce myself, my ancestry is Norwegian on my mother's side and Polish on my father's side, and I identify as a white settler, an uninvited guest who benefits from the stolen land of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. I've been working with the team for the past 2 years as a program evaluator and research manager for SUAP-funded initiatives. So just taking a look at, as David had mentioned, we did interviews with staff, elders, and members of the primary care team. And this just kind of pulls out some of their experience working within this decolonizing model of care. Indigenous Elders Partnership was one of the themes. I call it a canoe, but we have the member at the very center giving us direction, and we all paddle together to help that member get where he wants or she wants to be. An Indigenous elder. Indigenous leadership. I like that we have the butterfly. I like that we have the Kilala Lelum name. I like that it's like instantaneously known and honored that we are Indigenous led from an Indigenous staff member. Identifying and challenging systemic racism. When you know about residential schools or about Indian hospital systems, bearing witness to and honoring that history and thinking about how to reconcile that history as part of our daily work. Primary care provider.
I think I called on Jill when I was supposed to call on Elder Bruce for that, but
I know, I thought there were
apologies. Jill, do you want to keep on going and we'll bring Elder Bruce in for the next one?
If you're okay with that, Elder Bruce.
That's fine.
Okay. Another theme was the experiences of Indigenous staff working at Kilala Lelum. It's like double the workload for Indigenous people because we need to be that middle ground, constant middle ground between the non-Indigenous people who are educated with their schooling, but have very, very, very little education on what it actually is like to be Indigenous from an Indigenous primary care provider. Experiences of non-Indigenous staff. It's okay to make mistakes in that work as an ally. So many people are afraid. They need to be perfect and they don't want to say anything that offends someone. There's this phenomenal gift of laughter and humor that I've encountered that just allows you to feel like it's okay to make these mistakes. Non-Indigenous primary care provider. Still a long way to go. Everyone knows there's more work and they know it'll be a long journey, Indigenous staff.
So I'll speak to the system transformations. And again, our evolution comes from the patient medical home model, which we were sort of using to organize how we were delivering team-based primary care and what we found. And so these 4 things being comprehensive, collaborative, having practice enablers, as well as structural enablers are part of that model. But we realized that there's pluses that needed to be added to all those things to make this model work for the people that we serve. So being comprehensive plus. Doctors can't help the spirit. And I feel like we have other ways of healing here that are available, specifically help heal the spirit. So I think that's what sets us apart. And that's from an Indigenous elder. Collaborative plus. My favorite part is that I'm one piece of a much larger blanket. There's a member with probably 5 or 6 people on his team. He has very good relationship with the nurse, weekly check-ins with the doctor, checks in with me weekly, checks in with our wellness coach. And very close daily check-ins with our social worker. He said point blank, you all bring a different piece to my recovery. And some of the practice enablers, meaningful healing with someone. They need time, they need safety, they need relationship. And that's that relational aspect. Structural neighbors in an indigenized space, it's a sanctuary, and the environment itself is medicine. Elder Bruce, why don't we let you guys.
Okay. Non-hierarchical structure. I have always felt like I don't have a boss. I know who to connect with if I need support or guidance, but I don't feel like someone's telling me what to do because my role is respected and it matters. Staff wellness. The elders not only help our members, but also that's for the staff, for their own well-being.
Jill, do you want to speak to these?
Sure. Resource limitations. The biggest challenge is time, having enough time to complete all the work that's required and still making time to connect with each other. Learning in the context of culture and connecting with elders, that's a really important piece of this work, primary care provider. Colonizing systems of healthcare. So we have all these external pressures and we exist within this other thing, and that's the challenge. It is the fact that we are trying to do something that doesn't fit within the larger structure, primary care provider.
So trying to bring this together in terms of what we do. Again, this is a diagram taken from the BC version of the medical home model. And I think what we've done is we've added in partnership a circle of Indigenous elders and a cultural wellness team that are providing access to connection to Indigenous spirituality, ceremony, medicine, and knowledges. What we've aimed to do is put this all under one roof, one house, and further enable the system by, again, having the environment really reflect a healing space in an Indigenous tradition in terms of our art, our structure, how we organize the environment, as well as food has become a really important medicine for the that we care for. We also, again, throughout the organization, acknowledge the importance of having trauma and violence informed practice and a focus on just understanding the context of people's lives. So that comes together along with the lots of pluses to the existing system and really making sure that elders are included in that partnership of the team. All this together, what we've done, I think, over the last now 4 years is create an overlap between these two spaces. And again, I see that overlapping space enacted when one of our physicians or nurses at the end of the day or during the day has a difficult experience and is able to connect and then with an elder to kind of make sense of and debrief that experience. We always have an elder who's available for us, and it's really an opportunity for non-Indigenous and Indigenous providers to have that care from an elder for themselves. And again, there is some space, not sufficient, but where Indigenous primary care staff are able to not have to be divided in their identity and how they present, where there's a way that they don't, their social worker hat and their their identity as an Indigenous person doesn't need to be at odds with one another. And again, that space is insufficient, and that's some of the struggles that we have, and our goal is to actually merge these circles more and more over time. So that's who we are and what we do, and this is now the segue slide into the disproportionate impact of overdose deaths amongst Indigenous people. This data is becoming quite dated, and we're waiting for further data, but I think the trends remain the same, that Indigenous people are significantly overrepresented by a minimum of 5-fold in terms of the number of people who have died. When I look at our own panel of members or patients that access care at Kilala Lelum, there's 324 people, which is about sort of 1 out of every 5 people who walk in the door at our health center. 75% identify as Indigenous, 41% identify as a cis woman, and about 1% as a transgendered person. This is just the most recent slice of data, and we try to do this month to month, and we just sort of onboarded a number of new patients, so our number on out and remission has just gone down. Our usual target number is closer to 80%. Of those that are on out and currently achieving clinical stability, that means not having problematic withdrawal or craving, that's hovering around 30%. Those that are not on OAT and not currently using illicit opiates is about 23%. At last asking, and again, this is just the routine question that we've all kind of endorsed doing when we connect, we're asking about overdose events in the past 30 days, and about 3% on the most cross-section endorsed having an overdose event, which is down from about 10% when we started the process. The chart on the right just shows the range of prescription opiates that are available. And often some of these are done in combination, but most of these are the standalone. So about half are receiving methadone, about 20% sustained release morphine, 10% are currently receiving a fentanyl patch. There's 7% that are just hydromorphone alone, usually in tablet form, as well as 1% getting injectable hydromorphone in an IOT format. And we've just about 1% of individuals started on fentanyl powder as a safer supply injectable option at the clinic, which is germane, I think, to the next webinar that you'll be having. When we actually look back at our data from 2020 and just actually see who was in our panel of care 2 years ago, and then who's still alive today, there were 7+ members who died of specifically an overdose death. And so it gives sort of a 2.3% or 2.3 deaths per 100 person years if you're living with this condition in our context, which is, again, just drawing attention to the importance of this current crisis. Jill, do you want to speak to these next 2 slides?
Sure, absolutely. So part of the SWOT analysis and the qualitative interviews was getting staff and provider experiences implementing, and a newly implemented at the time, injectable opioid agonist treatment program at Kilala Lelum. So some strengths here that were reported. There was the opportunity for members to connect with care, receive services, and engage with cultures and elders. This was the most frequently reported. Injectable treatment options stabilized members that did not stabilize on an alternative OAT, and it resulted in positive life changes for the participants. Some challenges of the injectable program at Kilala Lelum: there was a high burden on the recipients of care, so multiple visits, wait times to get injections. It was very resource intensive, so space, time, and staffing requirements. The handover and communication between staff was challenging, and there was a need for extensive outreach for those folks on injectable treatments. Here are some selected quotes. You see people way more often. They're able to get to know you. They're able to engage in Hep C treatment. They're getting stable on their antiretrovirals. You know, they're getting access to food. They're connecting with social work. They're connecting with an elder. They're connecting with culture, primary care provider. We can all see an extreme stabilization has happened, and it's really very cool. You can hear these future-oriented plans, like going to school and like what she wants to do for work and like things that are important for her family, primary care provider. There are some people where other options just don't work. For some people, they've tried a lot of different types of OAT and nothing has been able to touch them, in that they don't have withdrawal symptoms, they don't have cravings. And when they try the IOT, all of a sudden it's actually something that does. It's been pretty amazing to see, primary care provider.
That's our implementation of what we've been trying to do. And we're going to transition into some effectiveness or outcome measure. And this is part of a cohort study that we call the Partnering with Indigenous Elders, or PI cohort study. And we're going to start with the numbers and the quantitative analysis, and we'll follow that up with a qualitative. So we undertook, it is a reasonable question to say, why is this study taking place, where it is self-evident to many Indigenous people the value of connecting with their culture, Indigenous medicine, spirituality, ceremonies through connecting with an elder. But there is I guess, a colonial context, and that's really why that colonial context is really why the study is taking place. We know that Indigenous people possess a wealth of diverse healing traditions that have endured despite the cultural oppression of colonization. However, the current experience of many Indigenous people is one of disconnection from these customs and high levels of mental and emotional stress that are reflected in persistently elevated rates of substance disorder, and particularly opiate use disorder. Our goal is to measure the impacts on Indigenous people of having encounters with Indigenous elders as part of an Indigenous-focused primary care system with respect to relevant treatment outcomes with opiate use disorder. And again, we do this in the context of the Truth and Reconciliation Call to Action number 22, which calls upon us to recognize the value of Aboriginal healing practices and use them in the treatment of Aboriginal patients where requested by Aboriginal patients. So our research question is, what are the impacts of encounters with Indigenous elders, part of a medicine house model of primary care on illicit opiate use in Indigenous persons living with opiate use disorder as measured by the number of illicit opiate using days in the past month? So it's a very wordy question, but we'll try to answer that. So we designed as a prospective cohort study. Our sample size target was 49. We have a set quantitative measures at baseline 1, 3, and 6 months, post-intervention, which is the moment where we tried to make that introduction to connect with an elder. We did some qualitative measures at 5 months, and we looked at emergency room utilizations 12 months pre-enrollment and 12 months post-enrollment as a way of sort of economic or health impacts. And this was approved by the UBC Research Ethics Board. So our methods were, we enrolled people self-identifying as Indigenous who were adults, able to provide informed consent, who had a diagnosis of opiate use disorder, including those in remission, and engaged care at Kilala Lelum, able to communicate in English and voicing an interest to connect with an Indigenous elder. We excluded those that had already had 2 or more visits with an elder at Kilala Lelum or part of a cultural program in the preceding year. And we used a intention and a per protocol analysis to look at these results. And we used statistical testings of mean outcomes before and after intervention, as well as the 12-month pre and 12-month post emergency room utilization. This is our study flow. There was 221 individuals who were potentially eligible. We excluded 172 of those and enrolled in 49, which was our target number. Study retention at 6 months was 76%. So we tried our best to connect with our research evaluation tools throughout the 6-month period. None of those people, even though lost to the study, none of those were lost to care at Kilala Lelum. And the uptake of the intervention itself was 62%. So of those that we had full follow-up with, about 2/3 actually made that connection to an elder during the study period. I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Khan. And if Wajid, if you could introduce yourself and then take the next several slides.
Thanks, David. Hi, my name is Wajid Khan, and I'm a settler from Pakistan. I'm living on the lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Soleil Watut people. And yeah, so I want to talk about the results from the study, the PI study that we just discussed. And I'm going to start with the baseline demographics. So we had 52 participants with an average age of 46 years, and 40% were female. And we also had, our participants came from a diverse group of nations all across Turtle Island. As you can see on the map there on the right, we have 17 different nations shown there, and the circles represent sort of the number of participants that came from each nation. We had 13 participants come from 10 different nations in British Columbia, and 4 participants come from 3 West Coast nations. And so, yeah, a very diverse group of participants we got to work with in the downtown east side. Some of the statistics we got here of our participants, we had 62% who completed high school, 33% with stable housing, 27% who had part-time or full-time employment, 21% attended residential or Indian day school, 56% had parents who attended residential or Indian day school, 65% had direct experience with the foster care system, 26% had been adopted to a non-Indigenous family, and at baseline, 87% were on OAT, 62% had ever had an overdose event, and 10% had an overdose event in the past 30 days. So this is sort of this table shows the results of the primary outcome, which was tracking the illicit opiate usage over time. And we have the two analyses here. We have the per protocol and the intention to treat. In the per protocol analysis, we looked at 23 participants, and we compared the data from baseline to 6 months. And when we compare those two, we see that the average illicit opiate using days in the previous month goes, there's a 23% reduction in that. And then if we compare the average daily dollar amount spent on illicit opiates, when we compare baseline to 6 months, we see a 40% reduction, and that's statistically significant. In the intention to treat analysis, we had 39 participants that we analyzed, and there was an 18% reduction when we compare baseline to 6 months, when we're looking at average number of days illicit opiates were used in the previous month. And there's a 43% reduction in the average daily dollar amount spent, which are both, and these are both statistically significant. We also had a 50% reduction in the number of opiate overdose events in the previous 30 days, which was clinically significant, but not statistically significant. So this slide just illustrates the plots, which of the data, the results we just discussed. On the left, you see that it's illustrating the daily amount spent per day. On the left, we're seeing the daily dollar amount spent on illicit opiates in the previous 28 days, and there's a reduction from baseline to 6 months. And on the right, there's the illicit opiate using days in the previous month, and there's a downward reduction when we compare the baseline to 6 months. So this slide is just looking at our secondary outcome, where we looked at how the emergency room was utilized by our participants. It's just an interim analysis. We don't have a full data set, but we have a data set for 46 participants so far. And we looked at the visitations of our participants 12 months before and 12 months after the date of enrollment into the study. And we classified their visits according to the Canadian Triage Acuity Scale. So CTAS 1 to 3 was classified as critical, and CTAS 4 to 5 was classified as non-critical. And when we sort of compare the retrospective 12 months to prospective 12 months, we see that there's almost a 29% reduction in the number of critical visits, and a 21% reduction in the number of non-critical visits, as well as an overall 22% reduction in the number of total visits. And we're just hoping that when we have the complete data set, this trend will continue. And so some of the limitations of our study, we have our study lacked a comparison arm, so it kind of limits our ability to attribute causality. We also had a high loss of follow-up rate of 24%, which limits the power of our study and kind of biases us to more positive outcomes. And then we had a lower than expected uptake of a connection to an elder, which is 62%. However, we just kind of want to emphasize that even though the rate is low, each individual is kind of on a unique journey, and when they wish to connect with an elder is very personal, and everyone has sort of their own unique timeline for connecting to the culture or an elder. As well, lastly, the 6-month duration timeline for our study may not have been enough to really study the full impact of the intervention.
I'm going to try and make up some time because I want to make sure we get a chance to go through all the qualitative results. I'll just say that participants were from across Turtle Island and had a high burden of poverty, impacts of colonization, and overdose events before entering the study. I think that what we're seeing is that there's a strong signal of positive benefit, and that this program allowed people to engage in the treatments and medicines that were offered in the primary care environment. And I think we're seeing the fruits of that by the significant reductions in opiate use days, and almost a 50% reduction in the amount of illicit opiate use, which is decreasing exposure to the illicit opiate market. And hopefully over time, these trends continue, and that results in decreased experience of overdose events. And again, I think we're seeing positive trends in terms of emergency room, as well as those overdose events early on. I'm going to switch into our qualitative storytelling, and we just took a subsection. We interviewed a subsection of those that were in the study who were part of the per protocol analysis, and this is the methods that we used, and you guys can review in more detail when you actually look at the slide deck. In total, we interviewed 18 Indigenous participants. Their mean age is described here. Again, a high burden of the impacts of colonization, with 39% attending residential school, 33% having one more parent who attended residential school, 56% having direct experience with the foster care system, and 28% were adopted by non-Indigenous families. In the interest of time, we're just gonna read through 2 of the 4 narrative compilations. And so we had these 18 narratives, we condensed them into short 1 or 2 paragraphs to kind of encapsulate their story around connecting with an elder. And we sort of combined 4 or 5 different individuals into one story. So maybe I'm going to just invite Jill, you're
Elder Sandy.
Elder Sandy.
Hi, I'm Elder Sandy. My traditional name that was given to from my Musqueam elder friend was Isnuxis. I went into care when I was 3 months old, ended up on the downtown east side, and so I am part of the 60 scoop. But I've been living on these lands for most of my life. Being adopted out, they were adopted out to non-Indigenous families. They grew up unsure of they were as Indigenous people. They left home and were living on their own at a young age. They started using drugs. Some went to jail and found their first exposure to Indigenous language and culture there. Some became homeless and struggled to find a place where they belong. Some traveled from place to place. Most had never seen an elder before being introduced to one at Kilala Lelum. Some found a place of belonging and come regularly to attend circles and ceremony. Some felt safe and wanted enough to open up and seek solutions to their problem, including using less drugs. Some felt empowered by connecting to their spirituality and are on a path exploring Indigenous medicines and ceremony.
Thanks, Elder Sandy. I think we're gonna skip to narrative number 4. And Jill, if you could.
Sure. For the children, some attended residential school, some had parents who struggled with addiction, some had been taken by foster care, and some fell into addiction at an early age. All of them have had to wrestle with their identities as Indigenous people. Some struggled to maintain their traditional language. Some had reconnected to their culture while in jail. They all had struggles with drug use and migrated to Vancouver. They're all motivated to be living a better life. This motivation is centered on caring for their children and grandchildren. All connected with an Indigenous elder at Kilala Lelum with this in mind. Some were able to open up about past experiences and felt more positive about themselves. Some felt their spirituality reawakened through ceremony. Some used their connection to an elder as a guide to their own Indigenous identity and see the elder as a resource for their children to connect to their culture. All have been successful in making major changes to their substance use.
So our thematic analysis, I'll just kind of run through the 7 themes quickly. There was a general, the observation of the interruptions to cultural continuity. And that's the continuation from generation to generation or within the person of their ability to engage in the practices. That no one chooses addiction, and that connecting with an elder was like finding home. And a chance to connect with Indigenous spirituality, ceremonies, and medicines. Other themes included reconnecting to spirit and finding hope, developing tools for mental and emotional well-being, and feeling empowered to make positive changes. And we looked extensively and asked all our participants for negative impacts, and we found none.
Okay. So I'll go through some of the key quotes, but just to keep an eye on time, these are all included in the slides, but I'm just going to select out some quotes to read now. I was adopted when I was 1 year old and part of the 60 scoop. So I was always told that talking my native language was bad. My mom never hit me or nothing, but she went to residential school, so she never really hugged us or said, I love you and stuff. I was abused sexually, physically, mentally, you name it. I've seen it. I didn't know how to deal with people. I was so withdrawn, and like I turned to drugs and alcohol in order to cope because I didn't have a clue on how to deal with any of it.
Elder Sandy, would you read through the selections of this section?
Yeah, I grew up angry at the world and I drank like hell. And I did every drug known to man to try to get rid of it. But back then, you just didn't talk about those things. I have the belief that like nobody is born wanting to be an addict. Nobody wants that. So it's obviously there's something missing in your life. There's a void somewhere that you need to fill. And that's how I got into it. It was like whatever I could do to kill my brain. I was really disgusted with myself. And I used, and because I couldn't find a way out until I came here. I'm just going to go through these. The drugs were good and just made me forget about it. I found it was a good place to be at the time. I didn't really have any worries or problems. It just masked it. I looked in the mirror and I couldn't see. I could see every bone in my body, right? And I literally started crying. Oh my God, I let myself go this far.
Yeah, I think this one's mine. I'll just read a couple of these. I felt that she, the elder, was very welcoming. I felt very relaxed and comfortable around her. I didn't feel like, I was unwanted or anything. I felt wanted, so it made me feel good. Like the smell of sweetgrass and sage gives me a calmness. You feel like you're accepted, your family. That's how it is to me. That's why I keep coming back. He prayed with me, spoke with me, just only had time to talk. Like they, the elders, just know how to ground you, told me how to be positive because I was just negative. I was taking on too much negativity at home. Positive feedback, that's what he gave me. He gave me some reassurance, and it basically showed me that somebody out there gives a shit. Jill, do you want to pick a couple here?
Sure. And the elder has been slowly helping me, like brushing me, teaching me smudging and stuff like that, because a lot of that kind of stuff my mom never taught us. I started opening up more because I kept a lot of stuff, like I went to residential school when I was in grade 1, and then coming back from that, yeah, I didn't really talk about that until like recently. I got to talk about it without being judged. Elders they're kind of like, show you that, yeah, there's a way here that you can actually be happy that the doctors can't help you with.
Elders are important. Oh, sorry, I gotta just pull this. My eyes are going bonky. Elders are important is because your spiritual level needs to be up there too. Like you can be the healthiest person in the world, but your spiritual health is not healthy. Then you're just going to be a healthy asshole. Just one more. Everything was just so encouraging. It just makes you feel good that I'm doing what I'm doing. And the flip side, that the stresses and stuff that I go through, it's a lot easier to let the pressure go. When I come here referring to Kilala Lelum and talk to people and open up, just overall better days. I feel more positive, more cleansed.
Okay. If it wasn't for the elders, I wouldn't have the strength to share. That's what gets me up every morning and to smile every morning. It's to them to teach me, bring me back to doing my praying, doing my smudging, doing it right. Elders teach me that I can be better than what I was before. Even though I do have some faults, there are still positives. You have to love yourself in order for somebody to love you back, or for you to love somebody, right? He was kind of teaching, oh, go ahead. We can keep going, David. Yeah.
Empowered to make positive changes. I'm just continuing to feel better about myself, feeling better about how I'm living, I want to be a better person. I want better for my kid. Even my mother, now that I'm seeing her again, can't believe the change I've started to make. You know, I'm no longer playing out in the street, I'm no longer doing drugs, no longer drinking. Maybe the prayer that she, referring to the elder, did for me helped me out there that time when I was struggling out there with drugs. I first started talking to him. I was using before. This was like 3 years ago. Now I've been clean for 18 months. I used to sell drugs and I ran with bikers and whatnot. It was like kind of a wild life. But with this new awakening, I have no need for it. I have no need for it whatsoever. Talked about what I was addicted to and where I'm starting to see changes. The longest time I've been clean and sober. So just to try and bring this together, you're always going to lose some of the richness when you kind of reduce a collection of stories to summary narratives and themes. But that being said, when we look at these narratives and these themes, they reveal that many of the Indigenous people's lives, how they've been impacted by colonization, and that there are positive signals of benefit connecting to an elder and reconnecting with Indigenous culture. And I think the pattern we're seeing, one of the patterns we're seeing is that connecting with Indigenous spirituality, ceremony, and medicines does provide alternative coping strategies that can replace drug use, which colonial medicine wasn't able to provide. And it's nice to see that these qualitative stories and the quantitative evidence are both well aligned, signaling a benefit with respect to drug use and other aspects of life from connecting with an elder in the context of a team-based Indigenous focused primary care system. And with that, I'm going to shift it over to Claudia to talk about chronic pain.
Hello, everybody. My name is Claudia. I am a white settler with Dutch and French ancestry. I have the privilege of being the program coordinator for a pilot program at Kilala Lelum called the Chronic Pain Management Program, which is what I'll be speaking about for the next 10 minutes or so. So some important background: the Canadian Pain Task Force estimates that about 1 in 5 people in Canada live with chronic pain currently. In the neighborhood where we work, inadequately managed chronic pain is a common upstream driver of using illicit opioids, which contributes to overdose risk. We also know that Indigenous peoples in Canada face systemic racism, which leads to inadequate access to culturally safe and effective approaches to chronic pain management and wellness promotion in general. Non-pharmaceutical interventions, which are things like physical therapy and exercise, have the strongest evidence of benefit, and these are not really accessible to most of our members. Evidence also shows that prescription opioids might do more harm than good when it comes to chronic pain management. And so really what's recommended the most strongly is individualized treatment and self-management. About 2 in 3 people who increase physical activity will report experiencing better chronic pain outcomes or less pain. And here at Kilala Lelum, about 24% of our members that have a diagnosis of opioid use disorder also have chronic pain. So there is a significant overlap there. So our program is multidisciplinary and it's embedded within the health center as a whole. We work with a physical therapist. Dr. Tu is our amazing family physician who has expertise in chronic pain. We also have an exercise therapist who's a registered kinesiologist. And of course, our elders and our support staff. Our program participants have access to all the other services that are offered at the clinic. So primary care, counseling, social work, all the cultural programming and food security programs as well. And our overall goal is to promote the health and well-being of Indigenous people living with chronic pain and reduce overdose risk when it's possible. This is a glimpse at our space. Really hard to take a photo in a mirror. You can see our physical therapist there in the corner. But this is what we put together in the summer. We're located in the community just across from our primary care space. This is the exercise room that you see. We also have a small multi-purpose room that the physical therapist uses as a type of exam room, but it can be converted into a counseling space and doesn't feel overly clinical. We also hold a bi-weekly chronic pain circle in the space that I'm sitting in now, which is a more comfortable, again, less clinical space. And that image that you see of the salmon is a beautiful mural that is going up hopefully soon in this exercise room. So we're excited about that. The structure of the program is as follows. So our members are referred internally. They can be referred by anyone at Kilala Lelum, really. The program lasts about 3 months, but we don't kick anyone out. So there's no hard deadlines. There's no fixed numbers of visits with any providers. So people get to pick who they see on the team. Some folks just like to see the physiotherapist. Some people engage with all the providers. And frequency is on a case-by-case basis. Yeah, there we go.
I'm messing this up.
I think that's good, yeah. So this is a SUAB funded program. We have outlined a few objectives for ourselves as we're undergoing our program evaluation currently. So we set out to connect with 100 people by March. We're about 3/4 of the way there, which is very exciting. We're also evaluating qualitative and quantitative impacts on members living with chronic pain and opioid use disorder and the implementation process. We're also hoping that about 60 members can achieve a 30% reduction in their pain scores by the time they are discharged. So these are more program evaluation questions. So we're wondering, like I just said, how many people are going to achieve that 30% reduction? We are using kind of a standardized scale, a 10-point Likert scale to measure this, that we're asking folks at recurring visits. It's called the PEG scale. We're also wondering that for those with concurrent OUD, what have been the impacts on their use and their OD risk or events. So it's too early to say conclusively because we're still kind of crunching those numbers and collecting that data, but there's definitely some anecdotal evidence of benefit supporting folks with their substance use. If a goal of theirs is to reduce that, we're looking at the number of using days and the amount they spend, essentially. For Indigenous folks with OUD and chronic pain, we're wondering what the effects are on holistic health and well-being. So we just completed a round of semi-structured interviews. An Indigenous physician researcher conducted them following the principles of the medicine wheel teaching. So the process itself, I think, was also quite healing for some folks, and they got to share their experience in the program. And we're currently analyzing those transcripts. In general, the members that have attended Circle, which is led by Alder Sandy here to my right, share that they feel a renewed sense of hope being able to come to the program and attend Circle. We're also wondering what strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are from a provider perspective. So our outcomes to date for the 74 people who have connected, about 3/4 identify as Indigenous, 40% identify as women, quite a large age range, average about 57 years, and 36% are living with OUD. At baseline, the average pain score out of 10 was a 6 on average. And for those who have completed their 3-month kind of participation, we see a general reduction to about 4.9 out of 10, which is considered clinically significant. Of these people, about 30% reported a decrease in pain of at least 30% or more, with some reports up to 60, 70, even 80%. So this is a quick case study. I think it's important to kind of look at a real world example. So an Indigenous woman in her 60s with chronic knee pain and concurrent alcohol use disorder engaged with our program last fall. She connected with the physician, the physical therapist, the exercise therapist, an on-site elder on a weekly basis with the goal of improving her pain and cardiovascular health. At 3 months, she reported meaningful improvements to her pain, so about a 35% decrease based on those quantitative measures. She also expressed feeling much more in control of her alcohol use including no longer drinking to manage pain, which allowed her to focus on her other life goals and engage more comfortably with land-based activities that bring her happiness. So now our next steps, we do have some goals to improve our spaces accessibility, so make it more accessible to those with mobility aids especially. We're also trying to streamline the referral and discharge processes to ensure equity. So now we're kind of looking at how we can move folks in and out of the program in a way that helps them maintain independence. We're also collaborating more closely with the cultural wellness program here at Kilala Lelum in the spring and summertime, hopefully offering some outdoor activity and some more movement-based cultural activities, as well as provide traditional plant medicines to our members. And of course, bringing the program to scale to meet the needs of our entire panel of members would be a great goal as well.
Thank you, Claudia. So just to bring this home, and only 2 minutes behind schedule. So those learning objectives. So the importance of system transformation and partnering with elders. I think what we're finding is that bottom line, I think it's a more effective way to practice medicine. It is part of a larger decolonizing movement, and it, good healthcare is equity promoting. It allows people to engage in opportunities in their health, in their life that they otherwise wouldn't. And I think it's certainly in line with the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action, specifically number 19. In terms of our model of care and its impacts, I think of those two circles coming together under one roof, and the process of becoming a medicine house, which is a term we're still trying to understand, particularly as non-Indigenous providers, to understand what it means to work in a medicine house. People living with opioid use disorders, I think, are more effectively engaged with the health care team, which becomes sort of like their extended family. We are trying to operate in a sort of a kinship model of care. I think we've been able to achieve high rates of OAT uptake. And again, the longer people stay as part of our family, the more likely they are to be on OAT. And we've been enrolling, we've increased over the last 3 years from just 100 people with OUD in our panel to now over 300. So it takes time. We can see that the toxic drug-related overdose events occur frequently. Again, that 2.3% people per 100 person years mortality. And there are positive signals that this care model is associated with decreased exposure to illicit opiates, a reduction in emergency room utilization, and potentially reductions in overdose events and mortality. Reconnecting to Indigenous spirituality, ceremony medicines provides access to new coping mechanisms that are health promoting and reduce reliance on illicit drug use. And for chronic pain and OUD are frequently intertwined, and offering opiate-sparing chronic pain programs with an emphasis on physical therapy, physical activity, and culturally and culture to people living with or at risk for OUD is a logical strategy. And I think we're seeing early signs of benefit from that approach. And so with that, I will ask for questions. I know Rebecca had a questionnaire she wanted to put out, so I'll give Rebecca the first.
Thank you. Yes, actually, just Fola, if you could do the poll. We have a poll that we'd just like you to take 30 seconds to complete for us. It just helps us with our stats and helps us understand who we're reaching and what we're doing. So I'll let you carry on. We do have the question and answer box if you have a question for the team. Such a wealth of information we've heard today. Thank you to all the presenters. We do have one question that's been posed in the chat, which is really about like research and the purpose of research when things feel very common sense. So Kareem mentions, I'm not surprised by the findings. That said, what was the point of the study, given that this is common sense? Thank you very much, smiley face, Rose.
I'll take a first stab.
Friendly comment.
Well, Elder Bruce, do you want to speak to that first? You've been through this, and I'll add a couple of comments afterwards too, if that's okay.
Yeah, it does make common sense, doesn't it? Right, but it's in that understanding of change, right? Trying to change the system is one of the things that we have to really look at, right? Because it's in how that it's the treatment of our people.
And I will say we did a similar round of research, and again had the same questions like, why are we doing this research? It was looking at suicide risk and depression with the same type of approach, a partnership model, and again showing positive, unsurprisingly, so some positive benefits. But it was from that study that we actually got traction with the Minister of Health. There's now 10 Indigenous elder sort of paid for salaried positions in British Columbia that I would say are directly attributable to that study that we did. It was amazing that just emergency room utilization seems to open doors at the ministry, which is, again, seems ridiculous in comparison to when you see how connecting to an elder, to culture, can make such more macro differences in people's lives. But we are trying to do this to push against the sea that surrounds us within this island, that this intervention is like an obvious one, and I appreciated all the elders agreeing. We had this discussion, and we got permission to still do this study, despite the fact that it could be, it's insulting in some ways to try and measure the effectiveness in this. So again, gratitude to the elders that we worked with, but a very good question.
Here's a tough question that follows up on that. And forgive me, I'm trying to figure out exactly how to word it. So we'll fix it, clean it up if we need to. I'm wondering about that tension, right, between Indigenous knowledges and like these institutional colonial knowledges, like of what is like legitimate science knowledge and things like that, and the processes that we go through to bring other types of knowledge, be it Indigenous knowledge or other forms of knowledge, into to be taken seriously by policymakers that see and professionals, you know, who see through that lens of like, you know, institutional knowledges or yeah. Can you help me with that a little bit? Maybe not.
Elder Bruce and Elder Sandy, do you want to, your thoughts?
I think that, you know, a lot of our policymakers and our clinicians are very textbook savvy, you know, and they don't understand that there's different worlds out there. You know, as Indigenous elders, we need to bring up those people. We need to have them understand trust and safety, cultivate a safe place where before we can sort of have them move over to the medical side, and that they understand the medical side. I believe that some of our people that are doctors and the people that work in the medical system, they talk a language that our people don't understand. So they need to really understand that you're talking to somebody that has maybe grade 3 or grade 4, and you need to bring that down. So
that's why you know, you see the unlearning and relearning, right? You know, that goes to the staff, right? You know, the non-Indigenous staff, right? You know, when the first discoveries came out of the so-called discoveries came out of Kamloops, right? There was a lot of animosity between the non-Indigenous and the Indigenous, right? You know, but I just kept saying, you know, that all I see is good people doing good work. Good people doing good work, right? And that's something that, you know, we have to all see, right? Because, you know, it's in that understanding we're not in this alone, right? You know, that's why I'm so grateful when we come together like this to be able to give some teachings here, right? You know, it's that understanding that, you know, everyone can make a difference, right? Everyone can, right? But that's up to them, right? We are and can be the medicine for everybody, right? Doesn't matter who it is or where you're from, right? But that's totally up to the individual to make that difference, right? You know, and it always starts with self, right?
Thank you.
I'll maybe just add a comment that, you know, I think it's right to acknowledge that there is tension between worldviews, sort of in the sense of Indigenous medicine, colonial medicine, but there's also there is lots of point similarity, and there's also many things that we can actually learn from one another. And that's why I got back to Dr. Elder, the elder that guided us in that sort of definition of what it means to decolonize. And it's a seeking of, like, for a group of people from each system, what works well, and use that if it's working well. And if it doesn't work, maybe leave it aside. But you draw from both traditions. And I think one small example is, we were taught by a number of our elders within Kilala Lelum that it's our ethical responsibility to be healthy people if we're coming to this work, that if you're going to sit in that role of a care provider, you need to first be a healthy person. Otherwise, you can't do that job. And it's unethical to do otherwise. And, the Indigenous system of medicine puts money where the mouth is. They take care of their providers. Like Elder Bruce was very clear at the start. I'm here for, I'm putting words in your mouth now, Elder Bruce, but like, I'm here for the members, but I'm also here for the staff, is what I've heard you say many times. And that bit of caring within a team, something I have never witnessed in any other hospital, any other health center that I've worked at. And it's just an example of how other systems of medicine, and in this case, the Indigenous system of medicine, could really strengthen the colonial system. So I think there's tension there, but there's so much opportunity for us to do better.
Yeah. I was just thinking about like the production of knowledge, like the scientific machine, the Western colonial scientific machine, where you publish a finding with, statistical strengths and rigor and all of this, and how that does bring how that is a tool for dismantling, for decolonization, using that, how you can use that as a tool any which way. And hopefully while doing that, transforming that whole institution as well. Yeah. Are there other questions from our audience? We did want to have a few minutes after questions to close, so we can move to that whenever you're ready.
Well, I think we'll give Elder Bruce the privilege of reflections, if you would, and then Elder Sandy, if you could close us off afterwards.
Yeah, because you can see, right, and more and understand, like, where all this came from, right? It comes from everybody, it's in that understanding we're not all doing this alone, right? It's in that understanding that we're all, it's like the canoe metaphor, right? We're all in it together. Right? So like, the work that I do is spirituality, right? And that's why it works for everybody, right? Because it's an understanding of where we all come from and where we all go, right? So, and I thank you for allowing us to be here today, right? And as we always say, you always take care of self first above anything else, so that you can care for others in a good way.
Michael? Sure. Just like to thank the grandmothers and grandfathers and our ancestors for being with us in these virtual rooms, to give us guidance and to give us strength and to open up our hearts and listen with both our ears and see with both of our eyes. We're grateful that we've been able to share our knowledge and our wisdom from the medical perspective to the Indigenous perspective. I think those two worlds are slowly coming together to decolonize what is out there right now. We are living in a colonized world, but we're trying to decolonize that. And the only way that we can do that is by working together, working as one. So as I say, everybody needs to take care of themselves. As Elder Bruce says, you have to take care of yourself before we can take care of other people. And as we say, we never say goodbye. We always say, see you later. As eagles fly above us, that they guide us safely to where we're going, and that you remember that you need to return back to your loved ones, and your loved ones are important to you. They give you strength, as well as your friends give you strength. So with that, I just say all my relations, hi, hi.
Thank you so much, Elder Sandy, Elder Bruce, and Jill and Wajid and David. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm really grateful to our audience for coming today as well and listening to the work that's being done, the amazing work at Kilala Lelum, the butterfly medicine house. Yeah, it's great to know that. I think there's lots we can learn from this, and we'll be sharing the video on our website along with your slides. I wish you all well, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any final words before we stop recording? We're good.